SpaceX is slightly changing its mission. I think that's a big deal. Communicated on Twitter as usual with Elon Musk, maybe a little bit uncommon for such an important event. Nevertheless, I want to get into it right away. So what Musk tweeted is the following. He said, SpaceX reprioritized to cyber defense and overcoming signal jamming will cause slight delays in Starship and Starlink V2. So this is what Musk tweeted. I want to discuss this. On the one hand, this is concerning. Overall, I think it just shows how Musk thinks, how this is another great example of fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact, in a sense that he's really tackling very difficult practical problems, and he not just hopes to solve those problems, but I think also he hopes to be able to develop new technologies around those problems and propel his businesses into new areas that haven't even existed before. This is Not Even Wrong podcast. It's March 5th, 2022. This is Krim Delco. For the year, we are down 26.5%. The market's down 9.5%. We're underperforming by 17%. So let's get into it. The tweet came on Friday, March 4th. It is probably related to the war in the Ukraine. Musk is openly helping the Ukrainian forces with Starlink technology. It's probably a small thing, a drop in a bucket, but it's, I think, symbolic. I truly believe it's also just his conviction to fight authoritarian people like Putin. And I think there's also a slight silver lining for him, which is, okay, if I can solve these problems, I can then probably propel my companies into new areas of technology that we haven't even seen today. This opens up a few interesting doors. I think first and foremost, let's try to think a little bit of how the DNA of SpaceX works, DNA of Musk in general. And I think we tried to understand this in several podcast episodes before, also when we discussed the book Liftoff. And I think the fundamental DNA here is that we have a problem and we try to solve the problem and then we go from there. This is sort of the building blocks of innovation stack, right? The innovation stack concept, one of the building blocks of our principle stack is that we have a sort of building a problem-solving machine. So we solve a problem, create new problems, solve a problem, create new problems. And this is exactly what SpaceX is doing here. So they solve the problem, they have communication with forces in the Ukraine, despite the telecommunication infrastructure of the Ukraine being destroyed by Russian forces. This problem is solved. It created new problems. One is, of course, cyber attacks, and the other is signal jamming. I think cyber attacks in general are attacks, sort of algorithmic attacks on software devices, and signal jamming, if you just Google it. I'm not an expert, but I believe that, let's say, a receiver that receives signals in certain frequency can be overwhelmed by another frequency sent by, let's say, Russian forces to just disturb the receiver's frequency reception capabilities. So those two things are problems that have been created, the new problems that have been created through Starlink. And I think Musk is happy to try to solve them because he sees the practical use. He certainly is on the side of the Ukrainian forces in this conflict. I don't want to call it conflict, in this fight for liberty of the Ukraine against the aggression of Russia. And he also sees technological know-how being evolved, or he sees if you want, sort of a better use of the space-time continuum, where he can go into, let's say, this direction versus another one, or just using the innovation stack language, he has created new problems, and he thinks that they're worth solving. That's kind of the way we see it. I think it explains really well how Musk works and why he's so successful in disrupting technologies and industries around the world. It's not because he's smart or anything like that. Of course, these are all ingredients that are important. I think fundamentally the difference between Musk and most other companies in the world is simply that he religiously abides to the innovation stack model. Of course, there's also this positiveness in there, this David Deutschian, we can solve anything that is allowed under the laws of physics. But fundamentally, the approach is an innovation stack model where we have a problem, solution, problem, solution. And this is a great example of how that works, because we have created a problem, which is, I mean, somebody has created the problem, attack to Ukraine. There was a solution, Starlink was there, but now new problems have occurred. And Musk decided to pivot a little bit away from the original mission and attack cybersecurity and signal jamming. He's done a similar thing with Tesla, where a few years ago the mission slightly was rephrased from accelerating the ascent of renewable energies towards introducing the word autonomy in there. So that was again a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of a change in mission. And the reason I take this very seriously is because I think particularly the companies that we invest in are mission driven. They are tackling such enormous problems, such new types of problems, that it is incredibly important to keep the North Star, because for the people working in those companies, the insecurities, the uncertainties, all these things are big enough that we need to know where is the North Star, what is the aim of the company, the mission, all these things need to be clear. And when they change, that is a big deal. And this is exactly what happened with Starlink and SpaceX this week. Now, having said that, I think there's also a little bit of a negative side effect of this, which is I personally, as a shareholder of Tesla, I'm not a big fan of Tesla getting involved into such aggressions and wars and things like that. I do appreciate Musk's involvement, but of course the risks are going up now. We are basically openly declaring a conflict with the Russian regime, and that of course is just uncomfortable. I still think in the long term, of course, Musk alone is wealthier than his wealth is a third of the GDP of Russia. So there's enough money here, enough power, enough intellectual capacity to fight a thug like the Russian, a group of thugs like the Russian regime. However, of course, that comes with risks and collateral damage and all that. And as a shareholder, we don't like that. So we'd like maybe Musk to be less involved openly. He can still do it. Just don't do it this open. Don't let the egos play. That is a little bit disconcerting, but it is what it is. That's the deal we signed up for, investing in Musk's companies. He has that strain to him where I think his ego gets the better of him, and he puts himself into, let's say, less advantageous situation, or less than necessary advantageous situations. But let's get back to the positive side. This is incredibly positive for the long term. I keep saying that in our morning meetings now. Assuming we don't have a nuclear war, and assuming Musk doesn't get assassinated and his factories don't get bombarded by Russian forces, assuming all these things don't happen, Musk and his companies will come out even stronger out of this Russia situation. Why? Because it is going to show to the world, first and foremost, how good some of the things are that the Musk companies are building. It was going to show to the world that the approach that Musk is using in his companies is superior to anybody else's. It is going also to show in products and services. In the end, that's the most important thing. If he can solve cyber attacks and signal jamming for Starlink, he's going to have a much, much stronger V2 network. And that V2 network, and this is something I said today to my colleagues, I think it's going to become critical infrastructure around the world. And this is, I think, also why China and the Chinese ambassador to the US just recently visited Musk. I'm very sure that this is the reason. These are very important aspects. Communication, telecommunication, all these things are absolutely key for the future of any kind of nation. Nations are defined as a border with incentives, and that border is being expanded through the cyberspace, and therefore you need to have an understanding of all these things, of all things cybersecurity related, and this is of course one of them. And Starlink will be a key feature, which is a good thing. Of course, you want to be part of something important. Again, the negative side of this, simply in my view, is that the exposure goes up. The Musk and his companies will be more exposed. Congress could get more involved. National security here, national security there. All those types of things can become more critical. It's already the case. I would say already today, Silicon Valley as a whole is absolutely crucial for national security. And I'm actually surprised that we have less entanglement officially between the government and Silicon Valley. Probably under the hood, there is a lot more going on that we know. But again, I think Musk has just propelled himself with his statements and his slightly, let's say, his skirmish with the Russian authorities could be perceived as just a small thing. I think it's a big deal. I think, again, it shows how important his services are, how important his companies are, and most fundamentally also how critical his approach is in solving really difficult problems that governments cannot solve. I mean, we've already known that. We've known that particularly with SpaceX, he's done that already several times. This is just another sort of enforcement of that argument. So to summarize, the recent skirmish between Russia and SpaceX shows a couple of things. One is, again, Musk is ready to tackle very important problems. It also shows that Musk is following the innovation stack model, which is great. I think on the negative side, we have a little bit more risk now that we have to deal with. And fundamentally, again, if we don't have a nuclear war, there is no physical damage done to the Musk companies. I think Elon Musk and SpaceX will come out much stronger out of this Russia situation. Thank you.